that airline food catering is very, very unhealthy. Why? Because it is so high in sodium and sugar. Very salty, very sweet. This is actually because your taste buds change when you fly. I did not believe this when I first heard it, but it is true. Cabin air pressure and the dry atmosphere at 30,000 feet or above effectively numb your palate, reducing your sensitivity to sweet and salty foods by up to 30%. Therefore, the airline catering is going to load it with that sugar and salt to make it taste better and to make it taste at all. I am telling you, the food is cheap, it's not good quality, it's also very carb heavy, hence the pasta, the bread rolls, all of that, to keep the passengers full. Hello, and welcome to the ShopLogic podcast. I am your host, Adrienne. On today's episode, we are going to be discussing travel. So stay tuned for today's agenda and subjects. But first, if you're a returning listener, thank you for joining again. If it's your first time listening to the ShopLogic podcast, you might be wondering, what is ShopLogic all about? Learning together how to buy better. It's kind of like a shopping education, if you will. I discuss all things about ethical consumerism, learning how our purchases impact animals, people, and the planet. More specifically, our health, animal welfare, the sustainable or destructive aspects of what we are buying, and how laborers are involved in the process for their well-being. The goal is to not be so clueless as to what we support with our money and choices each time we buy any and all products. It's not about perfectionism. That's not realistic. It's about doing the best we can each time we shop to improve our own health, the livelihoods of others, animal welfare, and the environment. Lots of suffering is actually rooted in consumerism. How? Through the foods we eat, which can be sustaining or destroying our health, through ingredients and materials we buy that come from livestock animals who are exploited on factory farms, through toiletries and cosmetics that could be tested on animals and contain toxic ingredients for our skin, through petroleum and palm oil ingredients and products that destroy our planet, and so much more, too much to even mention. Aside from your podcast host, I am the creator of ShopLogic, and I'm passionate about providing ethical insight for others and sharing what I've learned along the way so we can make better buying choices together. So for today's episode, yes, we will be discussing travel, airports and planes, travel tips and waste, sustainable jet fuel, is that a thing? Eco-conscious hotels, ethical luggage brands, and eating plant-based abroad. I am going to also be including some insider info. Why? Because I used to be a flight attendant. Yes, for international and domestic airlines. So I have a wealth of info from personal experience and observations I have made as an ethical consumer myself. So first, let's discuss traveling by plane and through airports. Air travel is one of the modern world's greatest contradictions. It connects families, cultures, activism, and ideas, but it also creates major environmental impacts. Airports are mini cities filled with food waste, plastics, jet fuel emissions, labor concerns, massive energy use. Yet, aviation's also becoming a laboratory for sustainable innovation, from electric aircrafts to refill stations and sustainable aviation fuel. Visually, the modern airport can feel surreal. Glowing departure boards, endless conveyor belts of luggage wrapped in plastic, rows of disposable coffee cups, jet engines roaring beside sleek solar panel terminals. It's both futuristic and wasteful at the same time. Air travel changed a lot. By the 1970s, cheap airfares increased mass tourism. Airports became giant shopping centers. Disposable packaging became standard, and plastic entered into aviation catering systems. Today, aviation produces roughly 2% of global CO2 emissions and around 12% of transportation emissions globally. It might not sound like that much. In fact, planes do not produce the most pollution overall. That title belongs to the energy, manufacturing, and road transport sectors. However, flying is one of the most carbon-intensive activities an individual can do. Let's discuss the hidden waste of airports and planes. In the cabin, a typical passenger is going to generate a lot of cabin waste per flight. That's going to consist of plastic cups, disposable headphones, food wrappers, mini water bottles, napkins, meal trays, and untouched food. The airline industry generated an estimated 3.6 million tons of cabin waste in 2023 and may double by 2040 if travel growth continues, which, let's face it, it inevitably will. Imagine on one single international flight, you have hundreds of those tiny butter packets, individually wrapped crackers, plastic stirrers, mini condiment tubs, untouched salads, sealed blankets, plastic cutlery. Multiply that by tens of thousands of flights daily. If you're thinking those sealed blankets are disposable blankets, that's not the case. The reason they're wrapped in plastic is to indicate that they have been washed. When you leave the blankets on the plane, they will collect those, wash them, and once they're dried and cleaned, they wrap them again in plastic, and on that cycle continues until they need to be replaced from wear and tear. Here are some shocking facts. Food waste is massive. Okay, maybe that's not so shocking, but about 20 to 23% of cabin waste is untouched food and drinks. Many international routes must incinerate leftover food due to agricultural biosecurity rules. If it's soft drink cans, for instance, and it's a domestic flight, and the airline offers recycling, then it might actually be recycled. But there are still airlines that don't even offer recycling options for passengers, which is a shame. And even if passengers separate their recyclables, there are airport security rules, contamination, time pressure, and mixed waste systems. This is because recyclable materials is often burned or landfilled anyway when it comes to airline waste. For the international airline I used to work for, we had green recycling bags and we would go ahead and collect the cans. A lot of my colleagues would say, oh, that's pointless because internationally they are going to burn it anyway. And that's true. International flight cabin waste is rarely recycled due to strict agricultural biosecurity laws. Most of it is incinerated or sent to deep landfills upon arrival to prevent the spread of foreign pests and diseases. Not only do they burn the incoming international trash, but also the recycling. On that airline I worked for, the recycling bags were green, and because we came around and recycled regardless if it was domestic or international, it did create this facade of an eco-friendly airline. And we'll get into greenwashing in just a moment. But back to biosecurity, international catering waste, ICW legislation enforced by the US, EU, UK, and other nations classifies all food waste and associated trash from international flights as high risk. That's because meals often contain meat or dairy, and governments mandate that this waste must safely be destroyed, usually by burning it with special airport incinerators rather than being sorted for recycling. What actually happens is cabin waste like leftover food, napkins, general galley trash are strictly regulated. Even perfectly good food or recyclable plastics are tossed in the same disposal stream because they might have touched those animal products. Toilet waste. By the way, this is not dumped in the sky like you might think. Ground crews suction the waste into sealed trucks called honey trucks. Ooh. Yes, I know, gross, and pump it into standard wastewater treatment plants, just like household sewage. If your flight is strictly domestic within the US, for instance, local regulations are not as strict, so airlines can frequently attempt to recycle items like cans and bottles successfully. Plastic dominates aviation. Yes, I can testify to that. There are so many single-use plastics, and I get it, it's for sanitation and hygienic purposes, but wow, plastic on the airlines makes up roughly 17 to 20% of airline cabin waste by weight. Aviation relies on plastic because it's lightweight, it's hygienic, it's cheap, it's fuel efficient. Ironically, heavier eco alternatives can sometimes increase aircraft fuel burn. Here is a misconception about eco travel. Have you ever heard that carbon offsets solve flying emissions? Well, those offsets help fund projects, but they do not erase emissions instantly. Some programs are more credible than others. Electric planes will soon replace jets. Electric aircraft currently work best for short regional routes and small passenger loads. Long-haul electric flights remain technologically difficult because batteries are heavy. Here are some eco hacks for ethical travelers. Bring a reusable water bottle. duh, I already bring one everywhere. One of the easiest and most effective changes. Lots of airports now have those refill stations that tell you how many plastic bottles you've spared from going into the landfill. Here's a fun fact. The San Francisco International Airport famously banned the sale of most single-use plastic water bottles from inside the airport. Another tip, carry a travel zero waste kit. Include reusable cutlery, collapsible containers, cloth napkins, metal straws, and reusable coffee cups. The term zero waste always gets me because obviously there is no such thing. You're going to create some form of waste. It would perhaps better be named minimal waste, but that doesn't sound as catchy. But eat before flying. I would recommend this absolutely. Airport and plane meals create huge packaging waste. Vegan travelers often reduce waste by packing fruits, nuts, sandwiches, tofu wraps, dried snacks. This also helps avoid surprise non-vegan ingredients on board. A lot of travelers probably don't realize you can bring food through security. The rule of thumb is it has to be the viscosity of peanut butter or more of a solid. So as long as it's not liquid, like you can't bring a can of soup or something like that, but you can bring pretty much any solid food through. Hope that saves you money because we all know the airport prices are insane. Another tip, you can request a vegan meal in advance. Options are typically chicken or pasta with cheese, especially on international flights. On domestic flights, you're not really going to get served a meal unless you're in first class. If you don't order the vegan meal in advance, they won't have any. Another reason to bring your own food, that airline food catering is very, very unhealthy. Why? Because it is so high in sodium and sugar. Very salty, very sweet. This is actually because your taste buds change when you fly. I did not believe this when I first heard it, but it is true. Cabin air pressure and the dry atmosphere at 30,000 feet or above effectively numb your palate, reducing your sensitivity to sweet and salty foods by up to 30%. Therefore, the airline catering is going to load it with that sugar and salt to make it taste better and to make it taste at all. I am telling you, the food is cheap. It's not good quality. It's also very carb heavy, hence the pasta, the bread rolls, all of that to keep the passengers full, especially on those really long flights. Do you know how they heat up the food that you eat when you get a meal on a plane? It's kind of a microwave oven. And because you are in a plane, those things emit radiation. Every time you fly, in fact, you are exposed to radiation. If you eat food nuked in the ovens, quote unquote, they're not real ovens, that would be dangerous, that's going to contain and absorb even more radiation that you then eat. In the beginning, at work, as a flight attendant, I would eat food here and there, depending what was available. Unfortunately, despite being an employee, you would think I would have access to request a vegan meal each time I go to work, especially for those long 8-hour overseas flights, intercontinental flights, but no, they don't have the means and resources to individually customize and fulfill the dietary restrictions of their employees. Therefore, I would oftentimes bring my own food, despite there being so many leftovers that were untouched, still in the packaging. So sometimes they did have vegan-friendly meals, especially in first class, like a tofu curry with rice. But even those meals, honestly, you can just tell the food quality just isn't there. You are paying literally thousands of dollars sometimes, especially in those premium cabins, and the food is not going to be that tasty. So yes, bring your own food. I recommend that. And fly less because of all of this radiation exposure. The average person doesn't fly that often, but for me, going to work every day, it was definitely a concern knowing every day for long hours, I had this radiation exposure. Another interesting observation about the food on flights, the flights from the US abroad were our typical, Cokes and soft drinks, and the food was just really not that good. However, from, say, European countries to the US, the quality was much better. The food tasted a bit better. And did you know that abroad, they even have different ingredients in mainstream brands like Coca-Cola? For instance, in Europe, they have banned high fructose corn syrup. So while the Coca-Colas from the US going to, say, Germany had lots of added sugar and high fructose corn syrup and aspartame, coming back from Germany to the US, the ingredients were drastically different. Even passengers could taste the difference. Back to travel tips, choose nonstop flights. Takeoffs burn enormous fuel. One nonstop flight often produces fewer emissions than multiple short hops. Travel lighter. Yes, this is beneficial for so many reasons. Every pound matters. Less aircraft weight reduces fuel use, lowers emissions, saves airline fuel costs. Minimalist travel is one of the most underrated climate actions. And I travel lightly. It's less to keep track of. It's less for me to carry. And after traveling as much as I have, I've realized I don't use half the crap I've packed in my suitcase. So I get super practical and realistic when it comes to packing, and I rewear the same clothing articles as long as they remain clean and fresh. There are lots of things you can do to minimize what you haul around with you. Regarding this sustainable aviation fuel, is it really sustainable? There are a lot of mainstream international airlines like the one I previously worked for that are exploring this SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, made from biomass and waste. It includes banana peels, used cooking oil, and animal fats. While not in mass use today, the airline's future-focused initiative aims to use these gross ingredients to eventually reduce life cycle greenhouse gas emissions by up to 85% compared to conventional jet fuel. To promote this, you might see safety videos where they include information on highlighting how this daily garbage can become the treasure that fuels airplanes. This creates an illusion of that airline being eco-friendly. Meanwhile, dozens of trash bags are being collected per flight. A bit of greenwashing happening with that. And while don't get me wrong, sustainable aviation fuel is a real thing. I know they use it abroad in different countries already. For the airlines to say to passengers, we are going to be flying with banana peels in the future is a bit of a stretch. It is creating an image of being super green, super eco-friendly. Meanwhile, you have so many single-use plastics adding up. Some airports now have plant-based options. You might see them in Amsterdam, Portland, or Singapore. Many of those feature refill stations, compost systems, plant-forward dining, and reusable initiatives as well. But the vast majority of airports are not vegan-friendly. Trust me, I have been starving on layovers and could hardly find anything vegan. That's a hot meal. Of course, you can find a salad, but hey, let's face it, all those salads have chunks of ham, bacon, eggs, and shredded cheese all over them. It's very, very, very hard being vegan at an airport. Bring your own food. Hydro Flask, that's the company that creates those reusable insulated bottles popular with eco-travelers, many other thermos brands as well. Stojo, they make collapsible travel cups for airport coffee and tea. Ethique, I've mentioned them before in other episodes. They have plastic-free shampoo and conditioner bars, which are ideal for TSA rules. They're not liquid. And Lush, the personal care and cosmetics mainstream brand, they have solid cosmetics as well, which reduce your liquids and plastic packaging. So SAFs, the sustainable aviation fuel, sounds pretty promising. But there are some downsides. This type of fuel is expensive, limited in supply, and not available everywhere. Currently, SAF is only a tiny fraction of total aviation fuel use globally. Critics warn about greenwashing, land use impacts, and biofuel competition with food systems. Here is some innovation and progress on the plane front. We have electric aircraft. Companies are testing short-range electric planes for commuter routes. Hydrogen aviation. Hydrogen aircraft research may dramatically reduce emissions in fuel. And we have smarter cabins. Airlines are experimenting with edible spoons, reusable mealware, lighter seating, digital magazines, compostable materials. Airport sustainability. Some airports now use solar power, rainwater capture, food composting, electric ground vehicles, and green roofs. Did you know that pilots carefully calculate passenger luggage, fuel, cargo, and water weight? Even tiny reductions are going to matter economically. So even though the incentive might be finance for reducing the weight of the aircraft, the benefits are that it's going to be a bit more eco-friendly. And did you know that if the pilots are in a hurry to get to their destination because of pressure from passengers, let's say the flight was delayed and they've got to compensate for lost time, so they're really hitting the gas hard, that's going to burn significantly greater amount of fuel. And window shades are another thing regarding energy needs. Keeping shades down while parked can reduce cabin cooling energy. and keep yourself and fellow passengers cooler, especially in destinations that are closer to the equator and very hot. You would be surprised how quickly a plane can heat up when on the ground and all those window shades are up and the sunlight is coming in. For many eco-conscious travelers, the goal is not perfection, it's intentionality. Ethical questions you can ask would be, can I stay longer and fly less often? Can I support local economies respectfully? Can I reduce disposable consumption? Can I avoid exploitative tourism? What does the future of flying look like? It may be radically different, including refill-only beverage systems, AI food forecasting to reduce waste, electric ground transport, reusable onboard dishware, carbon-aware ticket pricing, hydrogen aircraft, fully renewable powered terminals. Air travel will not disappear, but hopefully it can become cleaner, slower, more intentional. Many sustainability advocates believe the cultural shifts towards fewer but more meaningful trips may become one of the biggest transformations of all. Let's move on to hotels. Once you've arrived at your destination, where are you going to go? Are there even eco-conscious, ethical, or vegan hotels? By the mid-1900s, we had massive resorts, disposable toiletries, daily linen washing, air conditioning, imported foods, and energy-intensive luxury at hotels because they became symbols of comfort. But this created huge environmental costs. Hotels can be resource heavy because they operate 24/7. Water use. A luxury hotel room may use hundreds of gallons of water per day, especially through laundry, pools, landscaping, and showers. Food waste. Buffets might look great, but they often discard enormous quantities of untouched food. In terms of energy, hotels consume heating, cooling, lighting, laundry, elevators, and electronics constantly. They also have single-use plastics. You've seen it. Those shampoo bottles, coffee pods, wrapped cups, mini toiletries, plastic key cards, disposable slippers. When I was on layovers for work, I started realizing how much of that single-use plastic I was using and then vowed to just leave it all untouched. So the next hotel guest could use it instead of me. I brought my own shampoo, my own little toiletries, so I did not like to touch any of those soaps that I'm only going to use a couple times and then toss in the trash. Here are some shocking facts. Did you know tiny hotel toiletry bottles create billions of plastic containers annually? Many hotels wash towels daily, even when guests are reusing them. Air conditioning in resort-heavy tourism areas can strain local electrical grids. Imported luxury foods like out-of-season berries, beef, seafood, all of those carry huge carbon footprints. Some eco hotels, quote-unquote eco, still fly in bottled water or exotic decor from overseas. And cruise-style mega resorts can consume as much electricity as small towns. Wow. Here are a couple misconceptions about hotels when it comes to travel. Luxury and sustainability just can't coexist, but that's false. Many eco-luxury hotels now combine 5-star comfort, renewable energy, vegan dining, ethical sourcing, and fair labor initiatives. Another misconception, reusing towels will save the planet. It certainly helps, but it's only one tiny piece. The largest hotel impacts often come from building construction, HVAC systems, flights to destinations, food sourcing, and overconsumption. Eco hotels are always expensive. Well, not necessarily. Hostels, mini inns, eco lodges, and even budget chains increasingly use refill stations, energy efficiency, local sourcing, and low waste systems. What makes a hotel truly ethical? Be sure to look for renewable energy, low flow water systems, refillable toiletries. Now they've started putting larger shampoo bottles and conditioner and soap bottles inside the showers that are locked on the wall. If you know what I'm talking about, that's much more eco-friendly, less plastic. It's like the cleaners will refill those each time they are preparing a room for the next guest. Also in hotels, look for vegan and cruelty-free features. Some hotels now offer vegan bedding, cruelty-free toiletries, plant-based room service, vegan mini bars, no feather or down pillows. That's a big one. I can't tell you how many times I have been in a nice hotel and sure, the bed and pillows are comfortable, but they are filled with down. There's feathers, and I know the reality behind that of painful it was for them to get those feathers from the duck and geese that they pulled them from. So it really made me cringe when I would have to sleep on those kinds of beds. Here are some ethical and eco-conscious hotel brands. Again, these aren't going to be perfect, but they are better than average. Six Senses. They are known for reef restoration, organic gardens, wellness resorts, and many more. One Hotels. They are known for reclaimed wood, living walls, ooh, very pretty, I love those, and nature-inspired interiors. You have BWH Hotels, or World Hotels Eco Program. It's more mainstream affordability with growing sustainability programs. The Brando, that's an ultra-eco luxury resort in French Polynesia, powered partly by renewable energy and seawater air conditioning. Did not even know that was a thing. Beyond Green, that's a network of sustainability-focused hotels with strict environmental standards. Selena, popular among young travelers and digital nomads, with community-oriented spaces and some sustainability initiatives. There are also vegan-friendly hotel groups and services. Vegan Welcome is a travel dictionary for vegan-friendly stays. Veg Visits, like Airbnb-style lodging specifically for veggies, vegans and vegetarians alike. Kind Traveler. This is a socially conscious booking platform partnering with charities and eco-conscious hotels. A couple more hacks for eco-travelers. Bring your own stuff, especially toiletries. Decline daily housekeeping. It's going to save water and many other resources. Choose direct flights instead of layovers. Stay longer in one place. This is known as slow travel, which reduces transport emissions. And of course, eat more plant-based meals. And if your hotel doesn't have anything vegan or plant-based or like a super heavy meat menu, I always submit some type of suggestion, whether verbally or in the hotel review, and request more vegan options. That's a great way to give them feedback. Here are some certifications to look for in a hotel: LEED certification, Green Key, EarthCheck, B Corp partnerships, and GSTC standards. They are going to indicate sustainability, auditing, and fair labor treatment. What is the future of ethical hotels? The next generation of hospitality might include carbon neutral buildings, plant-based luxury dining, fully refillable systems, transparent labor standards, solar-powered resorts, and much more. All kinds of travelers increasingly want experiences that respect workers, protect wildlife, reduce waste, and support local cultures instead of exploiting them. I think we can all agree on that. Let's move on to our next subject: luggage. In the 1950s and 70s, luggage started becoming lighter, mass-produced, plastic-heavy, and globally outsourced. Although cheap, the downside of these suitcases created a throwaway luggage culture. And I am just as guilty. I've had to throw away a lot of suitcases because of one of the following: broken zippers, cracked polycarbonate shells, impossible to repair wheels. One time, I checked my bag with 4 wheels, and when I picked it up at the baggage claim, it had 3. Very breakable, these cheapo suitcases. Today's ethical luggage movement pushes back with recycled materials, modular repairs, vegan alternatives, fair labor standards. Some luggage brands are even building luggage from ocean-bound plastic, recycled aluminum, pineapple leather, grape leather, apple waste, fishing nets, and post-consumer nylon. What is the biggest ethical problem with luggage? That cheap plastic that I was just talking about. It is massive waste. Materials are going to be a plastic mixture, foam, glue, synthetic fabric, metal rivets, making recycling extremely difficult. And my broken wheel sent that entire suitcase to the landfill. Vegan leather can still mean plastic, so like I always say, just because it's vegan doesn't even mean it's necessarily ethical. And many vegan bags are going to use PVC or PU plastics. So it might be advertising on the tag, it's vegan, to get you to buy it. But that would be a form of greenwashing if they are attracting the eco-friendly type of customer. And yet that plastic is going to ultimately harm the environment, wildlife, etc. Here are some federal materials to seek out when buying a suitcase: recycled polycarbonate, recycled aluminum, recycled nylon, cork, organic cotton, plant-based leather alternatives. Avoid virgin PVC, mystery, quote unquote, vegan leather, excessive foam packaging. Also, I'm just going to insert this real quick. When you're at the airport, have you seen those plastic wrappers? Do you know what I mean? They are machines that spin your suitcase around, or there's a guy there and he'll spin your suitcase and it wraps it up in like a saran wrap. It's like saran wrapping your suitcase. And I could never wrap my head around this. No pun intended. But I was like, why are people doing that? And I think it's to keep the suitcase from opening, to keep it safe and secure so no one breaks into it, to keep it from getting scratched. I'm not really sure. I guess it serves many purposes, but I think that is a huge waste of plastic. I don't see the benefit. Ultimately, it's just like plastic on plastic on plastic. Here are some ethical and vegan-friendly luggage brands: Paravel, Sac Roots, Subtle & Co., Terrain. All of those are going to have better materials like recycled materials. They're lightweight, and they have spinners, backpacks, all types of travel equipment. We also have Steamline Luggage, Matt and Nat, Coco Village, and those brands use cruelty-free materials, and it's very fashion-forward travel gear. This podcast is not sponsored, by the way, at the time of this recording. I recommend brands based on if they're truly a decent brand. No brand is going to be perfect, but if they're making effort, if they are better brands than other brands, then I'm going to suggest them. All in all, for truly ethical luggage, prioritize durability first. Look for repairability second. Examine materials. Avoid trendy luggage, and buy fewer bags and use them longer. A durable suitcase used for 15 years can be more sustainable than multiple bags replaced every 2 years. Now for the final topic of today's podcast episode on travel. What do you do being vegan abroad? Traveling as a vegan once meant surviving on plain bread, bananas, french fries. Today, however, depending on where you go, vegan travelers can find plant-based ramen in Tokyo, oatmeal cappuccinos in Mexico City, vegan croissants in Paris, and entirely plant-based hotels around the world. Vegan travelers might face some major challenges: not being able to read the labels, no restaurant awareness, and heavy dependence on local markets. But thankfully, in recent years, veganism is expanding globally. Airlines have started offering vegan meals. Vegan travel apps exist, and ethical tourism is a real market. By the way, I did a ShopLogic podcast episode on animal entertainment that I recommend listening to. It gives you some tips on what to look for if you're going to exotic places that might offer petting tigers or holding monkeys, that sort of thing. Go check out that episode after this one. What does vegan travel look like around the world? Well, it's going to vary drastically, but in cities like Berlin, London, Lisbon, and Amsterdam, you have a pretty easy time finding some really good vegan restaurants and vegan foods available at the groceries. Not every place is vegan friendly, and I have been to quite a few places. I would say at least about 30 countries the last time I counted. I will tell you the countries that are not so vegan friendly. I had a very difficult time in Spain. They use a lot of ham and pork products, a very meat-heavy culture, which was kind of a surprise. France, they use a lot of butter and eggs. That was a difficult one, but countries like England and Germany were pretty good. You might think that's strange that Germany is very vegan and vegetarian friendly, considering they have the cliche of sausage and schnitzel, but they are pretty progressive as a society, and they're huge environmentalists, so they are really on the up and up with innovation. It depends on where in Italy. It was more vegetable heavy in the south, in those agriculturally rich areas. But at the same time, when you go coastal, they're going to have a lot more seafood. All in all, in my experience, major cities are a lot more accommodating for vegans than rural areas, and I absolutely recommend going grocery shopping. That's not to say that you need to cook, but it's very interesting. It's quite an adventure to go inside the grocery, see what different ingredients they use, different products they have, and you'd be very surprised. Sometimes they'll have ready-to-go meals or different things that are snacks that are vegan that you can try. And also, grocery shopping will save you money. It's a great travel tip. I prefer grocery shopping when I travel. If you travel to Asia, it can be a paradise for vegan travelers, but it's a bit complicated. You might think, oh, they're going to have tofu, they're going to have tempeh, they're going to have banana leaf meals and other things you see on social media, a lot of ramen bars, but it is complicated. Some easier vegan destinations might be Bali. It's kind of the yogi hippie scene, and Singapore, where it's quite wealthy and modern and progressive. Those are going to be places where you'd find a lot of vegan dining and vegan options. India is kind of, they have lots of vegetarian options, obviously, because of the Hindu religion. However, they use a lot of ghee and milk. The cow is considered a sacred animal in their culture, so it's a bit ironic or a bit hypocritical to use so much ghee and milk. Back in olden times, I'm sure it was a much more ethical practice, but nowadays the demand of ghee and milk and other dairy is so high that these poor cows are getting exploited. Thailand, it is a little questionable. Yes, they have a lot of curries and tofus, but they might be using fish sauce in a lot of recipes. In fact, some dishes may appear vegetarian but contain things like fish sauce, shrimp paste, oyster sauce, bonito flakes, or animal broth. And a shocking fact, in many countries, quote-unquote vegetarian still includes fish or chicken. I guess they consider those lesser animals. I don't know. They are still obviously animals in my mind. And an example would be when I used to live in Turkey, I would travel to Istanbul a lot. They had really good lentil soup. They are very into lentil soup. A lot of it was good, but sometimes when I would ask, is this vegetarian? They would say yes, but I would suspect there was chicken broth used because something tasted a bit different. And in Latin America, you might see a lot of tropical fruit stands, fresh corn tortillas, black beans. I am getting so hungry just thinking about it. And some vegan-friendly spots: Mexico City, Costa Rica, Medellin, Buenos Aires, Sao Paulo. There you can find beans, rice, corn, avocados, cassava, and tropical produce. Here are some eco-conscious vegan travel hacks. Carry a collapsible container for leftovers. Some places around the world, if you ask for a doggy bag, which they won't know what that means, but if you ask for a box to go after you finish your meal when dining in, they will look at you like you are crazy. That is not a thing in some areas, but don't let that deter you. It is so wasteful, especially if you can't finish your meal. You want to have it later that night at the hotel. Go ahead and do it. You can go to local farmers markets. That's also like super exciting. I love farmers markets in general, but international farmers markets, yes, absolutely. And choose trains over short flights whenever possible. Learn a few keywords. It's good to know some translations for things like milk, butter, egg, fish sauce, broth, gelatin, and lard. That would prevent accidental animal ingredients from being in your food. Use some vegan travel apps like Happy Cow to find restaurants. Pack emergency snacks, especially for airports and overnight trains. And book your airline meals early. Many airlines offer vegan, Asian vegetarian, Jain vegetarian, or raw vegan meals. Upon returning home, when you travel to the US, for instance, there are products primarily prohibited by Customs and Border Protection to prevent the spread of foreign diseases, pests, and agricultural contamination. The following foods are banned: meat and poultry, fruits and vegetables, dairy, and wildlife and bush meat. That's because they are concerned with things like importing livestock diseases. They are concerned with the introduction of invasive agricultural pests, and they are concerned about diseases spreading. So be sure to not bring those back with you. You can actually bring them on the plane. You can bring an apple, for instance, from Europe onto the plane, headed to the US, and eat it on the plane. You just can't take it off of the plane. On a final note, being vegan abroad is not about achieving perfection. It's about reducing harm where possible, supporting better systems, staying curious, respecting local culture, making thoughtful choices. If you find yourself in a bind at a train station or someplace and you're starving and you have to eat vegetarian instead of vegan and it's a sandwich with cheese on it, don't beat yourself up. Sometimes we have to make those little exceptions. Even small decisions like a vegan meal, an eco hotel, one refillable water bottle, one ethical tour, all collectively will shape the future of travel. Well, that was our episode for today. I hope you got a lot of tips there now that we are in summer and travel season is upon us. Be sure to follow, like, subscribe to the ShopLogic podcast and social media platforms. As always, thank you for listening and hope you join me next time. Bye.